Hey everyone, I'm Chef Dennis, and welcome to the beginning of the third annual Virtual Bloggers Conference that is coming to you live on Google Plus and YouTube. And we're going to start off with a very important facet of everyone's blog, and that's SEO. And today I have, well, we're waiting for David Amerland to join us, but I have three experts on the subject with us, and we've got Mark Trapp-Hagen and Eric Eng from Stone Temple Consulting. So you guys are here today, and we're going to talk about SEO and how bloggers can better use it or better understand it. And anything else you'd like to bring up is fine with me too. So I'm going to say hi and turn it over to you guys, and let's start. And also, if you have questions for them, please leave them in the comment section. I do have the comment tracker on, and we will do our best to answer them. So good morning, Eric. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, Dennis. How are you?
Oh, I'm wonderful. It's a beautiful day in Florida. The sun is shining, but again, that's pretty much every day here, except when we get the biblical rain. Then it gets crazy.
Yes. Well, beautiful day here in Massachusetts, too, and after 3 straight weeks on the road, I'm glad to be back home.
Good, good, good. Yeah, we're heading up to New Jersey next Wednesday for 5 weeks, so I'll be leaving home and going back to my old home, which I'm not really excited about, but I'm going anyway. So. I do love it down here. So, Mark, how you doing today? It's good to see you again. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been. Boy, quite a while. I'd hate to think how long it's been since we've talked on a Hangout. But yeah, beautiful day here in North Carolina too. So the trifecta, or the triple crown of the East Coast weather. Here we've got it from Boston to North Carolina down to Florida. We got you covered. Sorry, rest of the country, if you're not having as nice a day as we are. But we're going to try to bring some sunshine to your SEO today. How's that?
All right.
That sounds good. So I guess the big question for me as a blogger is, I don't understand a lot of what Google tells me in terms of the Webmaster tools and all that, but what are some of the steps as a blogger we can take to really get ahead of the game and to improve our SEO?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of where you're starting from. If you're not currently familiar with SEO, and it is a challenge for you to even think about it, and your time is probably limited as well, you really have to focus on some very basic things. So one of the first things you might want to do is just understand how Google is seeing your website. So the first thing I would do is install Google's Webmaster tools. It's really easy to do. And then once you have that installed, you can go in there and you can see how many pages Google thinks they have in their index for your site. That's really important, just to make sure that it's able to crawl your site okay and see the major pages of your site, and look at those and make sure that that looks normal. And what do I mean by normal? Are your blog posts showing up in the Google index? That's what you want to make sure of, and that's really a good first step, with SEO. And I'm going to pause after having shared one, so Mark and I can perhaps ping-pong back and forth.
When you say pages, do you mean how many different sections on our blog, like are an about or recipes or advertising or things like that, or do you mean each individual blog post?
Well, each individual blog post is what I would care about most, because those are the things that will bring traffic to my site. But you should make sure that your About Us page is indexed as well, and whatever other pages you have like that. So any major page, I worry less about the category pages of the site. And that's a different kind of story, but I sure want to make sure those blog posts are showing up.
Just to illuminate a little bit on what Eric shared there, what I want to emphasize for folks who are listening is notice that when asked about the basics of SEO and what your average blogger should care about or know about, where Eric went first was not keywords, not rankings. This is what people think of when they think of SEO often, if they only have a glancing familiarity with it. Really, SEO begins with, and Eric properly began with, just simply making sure from a technical aspect that your site, your blog, is reachable by the search engines. I mean, that is just step one. That's why Eric emphasized that first. The search engines send out these robots, for lack of a better name, we call them that. That go out into the internet and act like superhuman beings who just want to explore everything they can on the internet and find out what's there so that it can be indexed by the search engine. But unfortunately, your site, and often unbeknownst to you, could have some technical difficulties that keep those robots from being able to reach all the parts of the site that you wish they would. So that's why Eric was emphasizing that, and that really is your first step with SEO before you start thinking at all about, what keywords am I ranking for and how much traffic am I getting from Google and all those other concerns that people often think about.
Yeah, and it's not an automatic, unfortunately. You can have structural problems with your site that prevent that from happening. Now, the good news is most blog platforms, are pretty good about this, so you don't need to do a lot to have them show up okay. But it's just worth taking a little bit of time and making sure out of the gate. And hello, David Amerland.
Hi, David.
Hey guys, great to be here. I had a little bit of problem connecting, but I'm okay now.
Oh, I'm glad to see you could make it. And you're coming to us. Where are you today, David?
I'm spending the summer in Greece. I flew back here at the beginning of June. I'm going to be here for 3 months, so it's great.
Oh, how nice. It's a terrible life. I'm glad you can do it.
The weather's amazing.
Oh, good. So we have part of the world covered now with weather besides just us. The question was about where a blogger should begin for SEO, David. That's kind of where we were going with that.
Yeah, I gathered that, and I think the advice that both Eric and Mark gave is actually spot on in terms of technical things. A lot of the things, one of the most common mistakes that bloggers make, and even established businesses make, is that they set up a website and they start working on the content, and then they think, how am I going to get visibility? And really, the starting point for any kind of SEO is even before you start writing. Essentially, you need to remember that SEO is there not to get you into search per se, but actually to help you differentiate yourself from everybody else who's around you. Otherwise, that visibility which you get is not going to mean a lot of things. So a lot of the thinking has to happen beforehand. Questions which are basic, like why am I blogging in the first place, which means you have to establish specific targets. What is it you're actually trying to do with your content? Are you trying to showcase a specific skill set? Are you addressing problems which are specific to a particular segment of your potential audience? Are you defining very specific things around your brand and your business? And these are the considerations you actually need to take to put in place before you even start putting fingertips to keyboard and writing up a blog post. And if you have done that homework beforehand, then everything else that will come up, and a lot of things will be technical, they can be solved. And certainly you can gain access to expertise like Eric's and Mark's, and they can actually sort it out. You can actually find solutions to your problems. But if you haven't done that beforehand, finding those solutions to your problems isn't really going to help you because you're using your content in a very perhaps wrong way.
Well, I don't know how many bloggers actually sit down and go through that process before they start, because most of us are thrown into a kind of accidentally. We're the accidental bloggers. We decide to write our recipes down, we decide to share it, and all of a sudden, the next thing we know, we have readers from around the world and ad companies, and then we're trying to scramble and figure out, what are we doing? So this is, I think, where a lot of us are, and it's where we have to pick up the pieces.
Well, again, I mean, that's a very valid point, because you're right. In the pressure of doing things, a lot of times happen incidentally. You find yourself with an audience, and you find yourself suddenly the center of attention. Again, it's important to take that step back and actually understand what it is, because yes, the moment that you find yourself a center of attention, you actually have an audience, things can move forward. But if you haven't clarified in your head what it is that you're doing, you won't be able to sustain it long term, and certainly you won't be able to see what's the evolutionary path that you need to take. And these are key questions. If you're blogging, this is part of your longevity. You need to be able to do things more than just over the next 5-6 days or 5-6 weeks. And you need that clarity in your head for your own benefit as you move forward.
Yeah, so it's not too late then. We just need to start thinking about the right things.
Yes.
No, absolutely. Another kind of interesting thing about being an accidental blogger, as you say, which you're right, it happens to a lot of people that way, and maybe you've started to build up an audience. Just to expand on what David is saying, you kind of have to step back then and figure out, okay, why did I accumulate this audience? And it might actually not be the reason you think, right? It could be, it might not be just because you're putting out great recipes. It might be because of your humor, or any number of other things that are actually essential to making it work for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of different aspects come into it as we progress and as we grow as bloggers.
Right. I mean, when you get to the point where you're trying to pick up your volume, right? It's like, okay, hey, I've done pretty well with this 2 blog posts a week. Let me start doing 4, and you get more into production mode. You might actually lose what was that caused you to get that audience in the process, because you start thinking about it differently. You got to be really careful about that. You got to kind of stay true to what was the passion that caused you to create those 2 great blog posts a week, and come from the same space as you go forward. And the funny thing about this is, it doesn't sound like an SEO tip at all, but it's a big time SEO tip, right? Stay true to that core value that got you to where you are.
I think one of the most important things that you can hear, and you're already hearing it out of what Eric and David are sharing, is more and more, while there definitely are technical aspects to SEO that, as you get more advanced and you start caring more about your traffic from search engines and things like that, that you should be paying attention to, more and more the search engines are getting smarter at treating the web like real people. That's their ultimate goal. That's what they're moving toward. It's a long, long-range project, but they're building toward eventually what we might call artificial intelligence, where the algorithm understands the web the way that we do, and learns to value it, even more importantly, the way we do. So it's, we've always said it, and Google has always said it, produce your content for real people and add value and all these things. But we're actually in the era now where we're all beginning to see the harvest being reaped from that. The people who do that, the people who build real value in the content on their site that readers love and love to share and love to talk about, that enriches their lives or educates them or entertains them, that those things that Google and other search engines are learning to value those as well, so that by doing that and putting that first, you're really doing good SEO.
You just mentioned other search engines, and that's a question I always get asked. We see Bing out there, and is Yahoo still viable? Are there other options? Do we need to be really worrying about those as much, or do they work the same?
It's a good question. Now, Google has the lion's share of the market. As market leader, pretty much everything that Google does reflects the practices of other search engines for the very similar reasons, or actually leads the way in terms of how search is evolving. So really, without sort of getting into too many technical aspects about targeting search engines, which is always the wrong way to approach it, if you are delivering the kind of value that Google learns to surface because it understands that it's valuable, then it's going to work for every other kind of search engine as well.
Okay, well that makes sense, and thanks, Mark, on that echo. I will, if you guys hear it, let me know, or if anybody in the audience hears it, let me know. We had a couple questions, and I want to address those real quick. And the first one was from Amicido, and they want to know about install a good SEO plugin. That was their comment on that. Does that work? Is that a good idea?
Yeah, no, absolutely. If you're using something like WordPress, there's definitely it's a great platform, but there's definitely some limitations with it as well. So I like Yoast as a plugin. That's Y-O-A-S-T, and that is very good. So let me just talk a little bit about the kinds of things that will help you do, because it's just worth having people understand that. In WordPress, the title tag of your web page defaults to the same thing that you type in as a title of your blog post. And that's okay as a default, but it might not be exactly what you want from an SEO perspective. You might want the title tag for your web page to be a little bit different for reasons that we can get into when we actually do start to talk a little bit about keywords and things like that. So that's one thing it does. Another thing it does is if you have like date archives or other kind of archives for your blog posts on your blog, it will actually remove those from the Google index for you, which you don't want them in the Google index. So let me give the short explanation as to why that is. Like I said at the very beginning, the main thing is to make sure your individual blog posts are in the index, because people should be able to search on those and find those, and you want them to be able to do that. But your date archive pages aren't really distinct and different from a Google perspective from the blog posts themselves. And Google doesn't like you to put what they would consider low quality pages in the index. The high quality is each individual post, right? And tools like Yoast allow you to sort of remove those from Google's index, which makes Google happier with your site. So I'm sorry, that probably was a little bit confusing. I'm just trying to explain it as well as I can. Guys, you can help me cut through what I might be a little unclear about my explanation here.
Well, I think that was a good basic explanation. Basically, these tools, these plugins, help you to more easily find the things that professional SEOs might do kind of by hand. They might actually build into the code of a site. They drop down, for instance, Eric mentioned title tags, that sometimes you want to customize a title tag maybe around a specific keyword that you want the post to rank for, whereas you want your title, the title that real people see, to be maybe more creative. So what a plugin like Yoast gives you is it gives you simply a little box below the post where you edit the post in WordPress that you can enter the title tag. So instead of having to go into the header, the actual code of the page, and code in the title tag, you just type it in. So the plugins do other things. Some things they do are automated and behind the scenes, as Eric said. They take care of some issues automatically that you might not know how to do. Other things, they just enable you to customize things. Another things that most of the up-to-date plugins will give you is on the social side. They'll allow you to customize things for social shares, which can be very important, like telling what image you want to have show up on Facebook or in Twitter when people share your post.
Yeah, so I think we could break that down now. Let's sort of recap, because there's a few things that I'm going to add, one or two here. When you use a plugin, and you should have a plugin for your blog, and as we've talked about, the first thing you want to be able to do is customize the title tag. So it is better optimized for search ranking than perhaps the human tailored title that you give your blog post. That's number one. Number two is you actually want to write a custom meta description. And if you're not familiar with a meta description, basically it's something that appears in the head section of your HTML. It's not normally user visible, but why it's important is Google often uses that as the description for your page when it shows your page in the search results. And of course, that becomes therefore an opportunity for you to explain to the reader of the search result, okay, why they ought to click on your post rather than some other thing that shows up in the search results. So the meta description can really entice people who see your blog post show up in search to click on your article. So there's that. The third thing, which I had mentioned before, is that you want to be able to take things like your date archive and tag pages, and you want to tell the search engines to not index those, because you want the search engines to focus all their perceived value from a search perspective on the individual blog posts, because that's the thing they're most interested in, and you don't want to distract them with other pages which they will consider low value. And just to emphasize why that's important, if they see a lot of low value pages on your site, low value according to their opinion, forget the human opinion, that will cause them to be less likely to rank your high value pages because they'll have a perception of your site. You don't want that to happen. Then the fourth thing that what Mark said is to be able to customize those images, which I think is also a really important factor. So these are all kinds of things that those SEO plugins will let you do.
What we've said so far, if we look at them, and everything that we've covered until now is pretty much what Eric started talking about when he talked about a production process for content and thin value. And it's such an easy trap to actually fall into. If you wake up every day thinking, well, I've got to write a blog post, and your primary reason is to write the blog post, not to actually share content of particular value to your audience, then you're going to fall into this trap where you essentially are producing content which is not of high quality. And that will actually affect your SEO. And that's exactly what Eric addressed in a very technical way. This is exactly what we said when we started out, saying that you really need to clarify in your mind why you're writing that content. If it's just so because you think you need to write the content, that's the wrong approach. And it's a very human thing. So really, it's better to have a week where you absolutely have zero content produced because nothing good came up, than to actually have three blog posts that don't really match the quality of the rest of the blog posts on your site, and that will actually have quite a negative impact on your site itself. So it's worth keeping in mind.
I have seen some bloggers posting basically just for money right now, and they're made it an income by advertising different products, and they may be writing 3, 4, 5, 6 blog posts a week because they're getting paid by each individual company. I would think that's going to end up, I don't know if it's going to build them up or is it going to end up biting them in the butt later.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think that some people are able to put out good stuff that often, depending on what their focus is, and that's the real challenge. I think David put it very well. Before, if at the moment you're sitting at the keyboard and your mind is coming up blank, then step back, walk away. But if you could put out good content often enough, then that's great. But problem is if they start pushing a lot of stuff out there every day because they have advertisers and the quality starts going down, it's going to impact them in the audience, right? You're going to lose their audience eventually because people aren't going to like that stuff. Neither are the search engines.
And remember what I said, a few minutes ago, that the search engines are learning to value what real people value. That's their goal. That's what they're teaching the algorithm to do. So the problem with, what you're referring to is generally called affiliate marketing, where people are, you said, blogging, simply creating content that's simply meant to sell, meant to create a link that will lead people to something they're going to buy, and then the blogger gets credit, gets a kickback for that. It all ties into the mindset that both Eric and David have been talking about, where now you're creating content for the sale, not for the user. And people aren't going to value that. That's not going to be the kind of site that people are going to want to come back to. They're not going to bookmark it. They're not going to share it with others. Whoever says, hey, I found this great website that tries to sell you things. Everybody needs to go. It's not going to happen. And the search engines know that. They know that those sites are a dime a dozen, and people don't value them. It's not really what they want to see when they're searching. So it's not only going to turn away readers and users, but you're probably devaluing yourself in front of the search engines as well.
There's another element to this, and Mark has now touched upon it quite nicely. The moment you use your blog to specifically advertise content, you're leveraging two things. First of all, you're leveraging the audience which is there and which comes to you. And secondly, you're leveraging the trust that audience has in you as a person. Now, it's very easy to lose that trust. So essentially, if you are promoting products, it is always good to promote them within the experience of your own the well of your own expertise, because that actually is what gives value to the content. Now, there are FTC guidelines, which are fairly clear and relatively strict on how you can actually do that. And Google is also looking at that kind of behavior, and they have sort of profile signatures of bloggers who promote things. And if they get a sense that essentially you're promoting anything for money, there can also be applied a penalty in terms of how your content will surface. We see this very much in news organizations where paid content, where the website brings out news articles, but content which has actually been paid to be written and promoted through the website doesn't get the same treatment in Google by Google as it does as content that's actually news or newsworthy actually does. The same applies for blogs. So these are elements which you need to keep in mind, and things are beginning to accumulate, and you think, well, there's a lot of things that I need to remember. Well, the basic guideline is the same. Provide value, talk to people first, search engine second, and if you keep that in mind every time you make those decisions, they will serve you better.
Yeah, now just to talk a little bit more how this works from the technical side, and don't worry, I'm not going to get into technical details, just really basic concept. The search engines are, and Google in particular, are beginning to do a very good job of measuring how people interact with your site, and to look at the content on your site and evaluate the quality of that content and come up with a sense as to how much users will like it. So Mark, opened the door to this conversation quite rightly, and that is that they're trying to think the way people think. And now I'm just trying to help you all picture that a step forward. They have technical ways of getting at this data, which gives them an appreciation as to whether or not you've got an audience that's passionate about you, and whether or not you're producing stuff that's good for that audience. So they're able to do those things today. Not perfectly, quite honestly, but compared to where they were 2 years ago, it's a revolutionary level of change, and they're going to keep getting better and better at it. So for me, I'm very fond when I think of things from a SEO perspective of being like Wayne Gretzky, who was once asked what made him a good hockey player. And he said, it's because I skate to where the puck, not where the puck is, but to where the puck is going. And you need to do that when you think about your online strategy broadly, but also your SEO strategy. Skate to where the puck is going, and they are going to be very good at measuring how people are engaging your site. So be engaging on your site. It's wonderful SEO advice. And by the way, a lot more fun.
And I think we need to balance that, and that's all well said and very correct. Just I can sense that we might be scaring some people in your audience, Chef Dennis, who try to blog for money, who are trying to make a business or trying to make money through blogging. That we shouldn't scare people and make people think like, well, you can't do that anymore. It's just all got to be about creating fun or engaging content, and that's all fun games. But who makes money at the end of the day? What you have to be doing is thinking more strategically, thinking on a bigger and higher level. And that is that, yes, you can still make money from blogging, and it's still okay to advertise, and it's still okay to, to link to things that are affiliate links and things like that. But you can't have that as your focus. You've got to be bringing readers in, that's what we're saying here, with something that's valuable, something that makes them want to value your site and that it's useful to them. And if you go online, just study the concepts of what some people call inbound marketing, what Seth Godin called attraction marketing. What's working today from an SEO standpoint and just from a general business standpoint is where you're building something that's of value that people want to come back to and people want to engage with. And then along the way, because they're getting value from you, they're willing to take a look at what you've got to offer. They're willing to see, this guy does really smart product reviews that are really helpful to me and help me learn more about these products. And by the way, here's a convenient link on his site to where I can buy those. Now, just a quick thing, we've been discussing this a lot in the last couple of days because the new FTC guidelines just came out yesterday, and David alluded to those. The one thing that you've got, if you're going to do that kind of thing, more and more, you've got to disclose it. You've got to be honest about it and upfront. So now even in your social media posts, but in your regular posts. So if you're getting compensated in any way for a link that you're creating or promotion that you're doing, you need to disclose that. You need to have a statement there that lets people know that you're compensated for that. And that's just the reality of where things are moving, both from a legal standpoint and, as David was saying, what Google is looking at.
Right, and of course you can always just move to Greece and blog from there if you don't want to comply with those guidelines, right, David?
Is that why he's there? Now we know.
It could be, I hadn't thought of it that way, but that's actually quite a good point, because I think if we are thinking about how can we get around those guidelines, that would be the wrong way to approach it. Ultimately, any kind of connection, any kind of real SEO value comes from that trust with the audience. And if you don't have that element in place, then your content is going to tank, really, which is the wrong way to approach it.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. Yeah, that's absolutely right. I had to get my David Amerland jab in for the show. Yeah. No, and besides, just to pick up on what Mark and David are saying, I mean, people know, if you're blogging for a living that you need to make money. It's not that you can't do that, but as you do it, don't lose the trust of your readers. Keep delivering the good stuff, and you really need to do that. And one way I'm fond of talking about this is I always talk about being an expert at something, and I mean, obviously the guys here on this panel, we're all technical marketing people in our own way, with each our own little different flavor to how we focus on things, and that's fine. But you could be a great entertainer and have a really good audience, right? And that can work really well too. So being an expert, when I say that, it means bring something which people are going to want and gravitate towards. And be true to that audience, and you can really get a long way and be doing good SEO. And yes, you can do advertising, and people will accept that and not mind it. Some of them will actually engage in it if you do a good job of getting relevant advertising. You definitely want to try to do that, so that the advertising will add value for at least some percentage of the audience. This is kind of the formula.
Well, we do have some other questions, so let me get on a couple of these too. And Coach Moore is asking, or is it? Here we go. Coach Moore, no, that's not it. He's talking about trust, but here it is. Do tags help, David? He wants to know.
Now, by tags, essentially, I suspect is where you're beginning to put meta tags into your the content of your website. Meta tags are essentially keywords. They're the first thing that Google did away with back in 2006. So the answer to that is no. However, here's the thing. When you're actually creating content, knowing that these don't help, so if you don't need to put them in, but if you create content around very specific elements of what you're doing, it helps in terms of the clarification process of content creation in your own head. If you're blogging, and especially if you're blogging for a living, you owe it to yourself to be as professional as possible. And part of being professional is actually creating that clarity in your mind of why you're doing something and how you're going to do it. So the writing part is probably the easiest thing in terms of all this process. But creating the kind of structured content or structured post that will deliver really critical value to a member of your audience, and then having that understanding in your own head, that becomes invaluable, because it allows you to, first of all, really see how you do things, and also it helps you evolve. You know that you're not going to do the same kind of posts forever. You're going to basically look for different ways of moving forward with your audience as their own needs and perspectives change. So you need to have that deep clarity in yourself first. So it's a good idea to sort of go through the process of creating those tags in your head, or perhaps on paper, for your own benefit, but they won't help you in SEO.
Thank you. And we have another question here from Elizabeth, and he wants to know, is there an easy way in WordPress to have the date not index? And I was going to ask that before, because is it important or not important to have the date in the index title?
Okay, I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure about the settings in WordPress when it comes to the date, but essentially, the kind of content you create and whether it actually needs date or not depends exactly on what you're trying to deliver. So if we take, for instance, the fact that you're answering something which could be evergreen, and let's take for argument's sake that you're actually putting opinion up on the web. Well, having a date might help your audience quantify when this was formed, but depending on what you're covering, it may be very useful. But if you're talking perhaps about something technical, having a date on a post allows the audience to understand when it was written and actually have context for that. So the decision here sometimes can be critical. I know for myself that occasionally I go on sites and the first thing I look at in terms of the information is the date. And if it's not there, it's really frustrating because you don't know how recent it is, you don't know whether the post is wrong because they don't know, or it's simply out of context because of the time lapse since it was written. And these are critical decisions. So it is really worth thinking about carefully before you decide to show it or hide it.
Yeah, there's another aspect to this question I just want to mention, which is that WordPress, some default WordPress themes allow you to have date-based archives for all your posts. I'm a fan of not keeping those and actually working the theme to eliminate date-based archives entirely, because nobody's going to come to your blog and say, oh, what did Eric Engo write in January of 2014? There's no context to that question unless you were really interested in chronicling my life history. So far, the list of people who want to do that is relatively short. So that's not a useful context. So in that context, the date information isn't useful. And I would urge people that if you do have a date-based archive on your blog, chances are that nobody is using it, and it would be better to make the adjustments to get rid of that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Let's keep in mind that in many WordPress themes, the date-based archive was simply, within inverted commas, a trick of the past to essentially create a flatter structure and surface content, which would tend to get buried. And the way that search works these days, in terms of what actually comes into prominence, it's a little bit different. So Eric is absolutely right in not doing this.
Talking about that real quick too, here was a comment about Yoast, and I noticed that too, is they always say we're not using the keyword enough times. I try to use synonyms. I've been told that complying with everything Yoast says can hurt our SEO. Yes or no?
Well, certainly in this context of artificially using keyword, so and so many times, that's 2005 SEO. And maybe I'll be generous and call it 2010 SEO. And by the way, Yoast is awesome in general, but it's not about repeating the same keyword over and over again these days. And Leslie, you're exactly right. Using those synonyms is really important. And it just doesn't read right to a real user. A user comes to your page, right? And let's say you're doing a page about, I don't know, annuals, annual flowers, right? And by the time you've used the word annual 17 times on that page, well, probably 12 times before that, I'm already tired of seeing it as a human. And to the search engines, it becomes this signal, like this alarm signal saying spammer or manipulator, or, these words start getting broadcast out. For me, we hire a lot of writers to help us with projects we work on at Stone Temple Consulting. Never, ever do we give the writer anything other than, here's a proposed title concept, go create a good article. We never say anything about using any word too many times or anything. And might we make a small tweak or two? We might, but it will be small because you got to let good writers write good stuff. It's got to start there, and the overuse of keywords is a danger. You do need to stay on the topic, right? If you're supposed to be writing about annuals, then you don't want to start writing about strategies for laying down a new asphalt driveway. That's unrelated, right? But stay on topic. Don't be artificial about it.
Very good. And here's a question from Michael Thomas. He wants to know if we can address hashtags. Are they of any help to us?
Yeah, they are. And let's look at how hashtags are actually used. They're used in Google+, but also primarily Twitter, in order to group together very specific content which either links to something else and will come up in search for that, or it becomes part of what you do as a blogger in terms of the content which you're using. So in a way, we are creating what is called an ontology in technical terms. An ontology essentially is a collection of content of very specific expertise, or very specific slant, that begins to clarify in the audience, in the mind of your audience, but also in search, in the mind of the search engine, what you do. So for instance, we know that Chef Dennis shares some fantastic recipes, and he does that. And he could perhaps use specific hashtags to group those recipes in something very specific. If he suddenly started sharing posts about SSD drives and flash drives and hard drives in data centers, that would be a wrong signal to send in that content, unless he used a hashtag and started building up a separate body of work which would actually help clarify that for different part of his audience. So hashtags are very useful. Again, they're part of the critical thinking you need to actually carry out as you begin to write. So you've got to think, what am I writing about? If you're writing about, the asphalt that Eric mentioned, that has to be in that grouping of content that actually makes sense. So hashtags are good to have.
I think from an SEO standpoint, and since we're in an SEO session here, people are probably asking from that context. Like, I get asked this question a lot. Do hashtags affect my SEO? That's a difficult question to answer, because when you get down to the specifics of things that become ranking factors, and especially in the social realm, because Google spokespersons have been very tentative and cautious in their language about using social signals. When they talk about them, they generally want us to understand that, at least in what they'll say publicly, that social is a difficult area for them in terms of search, because it's so volatile. It changes moment by moment. It's hard to discern authority of signal there. None of that means that they aren't looking at it or that they aren't using it at all, but we don't know to what extent. And when it comes to something like hashtags, and now especially as we think of Google again having access to the Twitter pipeline, that they can see all tweets in real time, it's possible that hashtags might be one way that Google would be looking at how do we begin to build an ontology, as a semantic ontology, as David was talking about. And it's essentially users tagging their own posts to say this is what this is about. So that might be useful information. And just quickly again, within Google+, I just want to note, as some of us have probably noticed, in the last few weeks, a lot of changes have happened within Google+, and one of those is that we've seen the disappearance of the auto hashtag as a visible hashtag. You used to see for about the last year or so, oftentimes if you put up a post and you didn't put any hashtags in it, you go look at it later and there's a hashtag up in the upper right corner. And if you hover over it, there might be 2 or 3 of them. And that was Google attempting to automatically classify your post. Now, they took them away visibly, probably because their data showed that users weren't really valuing it. It wasn't adding any value for real people, but they're still there. We know that because if you go to the Explore tab, you can see, if you explore a hashtag, that the related hashtags still come up. And that's a very interesting experiment, that some of us have been watching for 2 years, because it says, Google's playing with these kind of things and saying, can we gather some semantically relevant information out of this, and we begin to bring some intelligence to it, where we say, like, okay, you know, you use the hashtag SEO, but this post, you know, SEO post also, this post also kind of relates to social media or relates to content, and so we're going to bring those things together. It's just interesting to watch how they're playing with it.
Well, it's also interesting, just to give you a little insight into Google, because it's entirely possible the reason that they did the auto hashtag was to see how much users edited what they suggested as a way of training their algorithm for generating better auto hashtags. And you know, it's a process for building machine intelligence with crowdsourced testing, effectively. So they could throw up hashtags, and if they didn't get the label right, you know, people would tend to correct them, right? So that's Google in action. They do a lot of this kind of stuff. We love them for it, though.
You don't have any choice. You gotta love them. It's like having another kid. Here we go. Here's a question from Kim Boltman. Do search engines take comments and replies into account? You were talking about engagement, and that was a question that came up about engagement on your blog.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, let's think about this. Certainly. I mean, a lot of the times we have seen content surface in search because of the length and content of a comment, which is in relation to a blog post. So the short answer to that is yes. It's fairly complicated because essentially, you know, you could have a lot of comments, but if there's very little value to them, then essentially, you know, if they're one-word comments or, you know, perhaps very quick lines which don't add anything extra, then it doesn't really add a lot of depth to your blog post. And it's also questionable in terms of engagement. And I mention this because, you know, this is one of the signals that people think they can gain. You know, if they can get 20 of their friends to go and put comments on a blog post, I think, well, you know, I'm showing that there's engagement there. But engagement actually does mean engagement. It means a specificity in terms of the length and the depth and the content that's actually used in the comment. Perhaps sometimes there's a dialogue that ensues in a really good blog post amongst the commenters themselves, and certainly sometimes between the blog post writer and the commenters. So if you have real engagement, that's a real value. It's value in terms of search and SEO, but also in value in terms of the social proof that that site visitors will actually see and engage with. So you know, you can't really fake it. If it's real, it's real and it'll work for you. If you try to fake it, it won't work for you. It is definitely worth having for many different reasons, including visibility and keywords which come up in context and relevant queries.
Yeah, no, I agree with 100% with that. When it's real engagement with your post, it will help. If you try to do it artificially, it's pretty easy to detect that artificial stuff.
Very good. Here's a quick question from Shea Goldstein. She wants to know if using more than one SEO plugin would be more effective.
No, I don't think so. I mean, if the SEO plugin adds some new feature that the other one doesn't, that you need, and you have some lack of overlap in features, maybe, but I think it's a little bit of overkill. You know, sometimes people overthink what they're trying to do with SEO greatly. I mean, honestly, if you get one plugin, you take care of the top, you know, few things we talked about early in the show, and then, you know, just make sure you address those things, and after that, forget about it and be a good writer.
Yeah, can I just start here? And what Eric said absolutely stands. Essentially, plugins are sort of a generalized SEO rule that tries to cover everybody, otherwise it wouldn't work. And every time you get generalizations, you also tend to get huge exceptions. If you're using only one, then you become acquainted with those exceptions to what you do, and you begin to sort of rectify them. So basically, you use the plugin in a clever way rather than an automated way to help you achieve what you want to achieve, and then you sort of tweak anything which is relevant to you. Now, if you're using two, the chances are that basically they are counteracting at some point each other, and it becomes too complicated for you to manage effectively. So two here is not better than one. So it's best to focus on what you're actually using all the time and be consistent.
Very good. All right, here's a long one from William Rock, and it's the meta tags that I use are title and description, and build it like I would if I was paying for traffic on Google AdWords. Limit your message and be accurate to what that page is about so that when the searcher lands on the page, it's accurate to what they have requested. Otherwise, you will receive high bounce rates on your website, and they just leave the page and repeat the search. Missed opportunities? How can you track them to click?
Yeah, no, exactly right. I completely agree. So the way I like to think about it is if I look at the search result for one of my pages, and I see it in there, and I see the title tag that shows up as the title of the search result, and then the meta description, I call that the promise. So the user's there, and what you see there in the search result, that's the promise you've made the user about to the user about what they're going to get. And if you don't deliver on the promise when someone gets to your post, then yeah, you're going to send off really negative engagement signals, and you won't last very long. And just to help underscore that, I want to provide a little bit of insight into one of the things that I believe that Google does today. Basically, you can have different kinds of signals, like the quality of your content and links and these kinds of things, cause Google to choose to rank you highly. But that choice of ranking you highly is actually not really a guarantee that you'll be ranked highly. You have the opportunity to be tested in that high-ranking position. And then if the user engagement with your post isn't at a high enough level that Google continues to believe you deserve that high ranking, you will move back down again. So William is exactly right. You need that title tag and that meta description to be true to the content behind it. But I will add one other thing. When you write a meta description, focus on writing the meta description to describe the benefit the user will receive by getting to your post. It's not hard sell by any means, but this post will teach you what you need to know about how to do blah. I mean, something along those lines is get right to what's the benefit of clicking on this particular thing in the search results. If you do that really well, you'll entice a higher click-through rate, and you will succeed in delivering on the promise.
Yeah, yes. It was brilliant, I think, of William to make the comparison to AdWords ads, because I spent 3 years writing AdWords ads, managing AdWords accounts, and that becomes a real art and science.
I'm so sorry to hear that. Oh, so yeah. Go on.
Thank you. Eric, I will thank you forever for rescuing me out of that life of slavery. No, thankfully I was long out of that by the time Eric came along, but it was good training for this sort of thing and this sort of thinking, because at AdWords it's amazing. I forget now the character limits, but you think tweets are tweets are twite. That you have only so many characters for the headline, and then you have 2 lines. Again, very, very limited space in which you've got to get your whole advertising message across. The whole reason that somebody's going to click on that ad has to be in those few words, and that's what your meta title and your meta description are doing in search. They're saying, here's why. And there's been some good studies out there that have shown that a good meta description can draw people from clicking on, they might most naturally, of course, we know will click on the first result right at the top. That usually gets the most clicks. But a lot of times with some searches, people are not going to automatically click on the first thing they see. They're going to scan the results and look for something that's worth clicking on. And if yours is like the 3rd, 4th, 5th down the page, but it has a better title and a better description that makes the exact promise to the reader that what they're looking for in their query, they're more likely to click on that result. Now the other side of that is, as we've been saying, is you'd better deliver. Don't lie. Once the people get to the page better deliver on the promise. And I love that William called it the promise. That's really what it is. Or actually, Eric called it that. Sorry, credit.
Yeah, sorry. I'm just gonna add to what both Mark and Eric said. And William is very technically adept, so I'm very glad he actually brought that question up. It signifies the split between what we would call old SEO and new SEO. And essentially, when we were writing in the past, traffic was a primary aim, and we tended to craft the kind of headlines that would attract clicks, and this is where the word clickbait comes from. And today, really, you need to be, what Mark was really getting at, is be relevant. So essentially, if you have a clear understanding of your audience and what you do for them, if you craft a title that basically reflects exactly that unwritten contract between you and them, that's the one that has the best chance and best opportunity for them to click on and connect with you. So it's that relevance that you're looking for every time you write something.
Very good. Wow. Well, this hour's flown by. A lot of great information, guys, and a lot of good questions from the audience. Thank you so much. Is there any advice or anything we think we've missed that you'd like to touch on before we end this session that would be relevant to the bloggers?
Well, I would say, we covered a lot of things, and it tends to be overwhelming. And Mark mentioned in the beginning that, if you stack everything up, it becomes an enormous mountain of things to keep in mind. But it really is very simple. It comes down to clarifying in that first instance why you're doing something, who you're doing it for, and then how you're going to best do it. And if you go through that process, then essentially everything else tends to take care of itself. There are details and tweaks which you can certainly carry out, and you are bound to sort of find out about them as you progress and you become better. But that core element of value has to be there. If it isn't there, everything else, and Eric gave the example of a fantastically well optimized page ranking well initially and doing nothing because it's tanking. Well, we see this time and again. The technicalities are secondary. The primary aim is to deliver value to your audience and actually connect with them in real terms.
Yeah, no, I think it's great advice. And then when you do get to the technical aspects of SEO, there really are just those few basic things you need to get right. I talked about making sure that your indexation was working properly. We talked about installing a plugin and the few things that would do for you. This is a blogger's audience here. Your value is who you are and the expertise or entertainment that you're projecting out there. So you don't really have to think about spending 10, 20 hours a week on SEO. I mean, just every time you do a post, a little bit of tuning, and focus on your true added value, and that will get you a long, long way.
And I think the only thing that I would add that we maybe haven't touched on is just cautioning people against the shortcuts. It's like anything in life. You're going to be tempted by shortcuts, and by shortcuts I mean, kind of the get-rich-quick schemes of SEO, where you enter into these rings of people who exchange links with no relevance or value. Just let's all get each other as many links as we can, or where you're buying links, things like that. There's dozens of schemes like that, and you can recognize them when they come along. There's no get-rich-quick schemes in life, and there are no get-rich-quick schemes in SEO. Everything you've heard us talk about today could really maybe summed up in work toward building a long-term successful brand. And by brand, it doesn't mean you have to become Coca-Cola. It just means, what are you known for? What do people trust you for? What do people go to you for? What do they say? You want to get to that point where people say, either by your company name or your personal name, oh, you want to know about blank? You need to read blank. And that last blank needs to be filled in with your name, your brand. That's what you want to build toward. That's long-term value. Avoid the shortcuts.
Great advice from everyone, and it's been a really good, informative session, and there's a lot of good stuff that people can take away from this. And if you came in late or you missed it altogether, well, if you missed it altogether, you won't be hearing this, but if you came in late, you can watch it on replay. on my YouTube channel, and you can get in depth and take notes and learn a little bit more about what you should do to help you with SEO. And thanks so much to my great panel, David Amerland, Eric Engie, and Mark Trapp-Hagen. You have been wonderful today, and thank you for taking the time to help all of our blogger friends with this. It's always
Our pleasure.
See you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and take care. Bye-bye.
I'll be coming back in an hour at 12 o'clock with how to be a YouTube show host, and I'll have Mia Voss, Aslan Bloor, and Jeff C. on for that session. So please join us then, and thanks again for showing up, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
See you later.
Bye.